They did it, ladies and gentlemen. The Indiana Pacers get things kicked off after 4 days off with a victory over the Philadelphia 76ers, 121 to 107. And on today's show, Tyler Smith from Indy Sports Legends hopped on a Friday evening to talk with me about this game. But in addition to that, we got some news from Shams Charania before the game started that the Indiana Pacers on Sunday will be making a deal with the Miami Heat to acquire former Indiana Hoosier big man Thomas Bryant. Now, Tyler Smith does a great job covering the Pacers for ISL, but he also covers the Hoosiers. So I thought, what better person to bring on than someone that actually covers both the college and basketball sides of things for Indiana sports? So Tyler has some great insight and just knowledge of Thomas Bryant's game and how he's going to fit with the Pacers. So we touch on that in the first segment. And then in the second segment, we dive into the entirety of this game and just how Tyrese Haliburton played and Obi Toppin played. So a lot of good stuff here for that. But wanted to give you guys a quick update. Next week, you will not be hearing from me on this podcast. I will not be able to record, as a lot of you guys know that my wife is pregnant and it looks like the baby's on the way. So next week, I'm going to be out. Fachi's going to be holding things down here. So make sure you all tune in, listen to all the guests Fachi's going to have on. He'll definitely be back to recap the Pelicans game on Sunday. I know there's some names that he's got in mind to bring on this show. So hopefully you guys stay tuned because Fachi is going to hold it down while I'm out. And then probably next week, I'll be back and we'll get back to normal. But with that being said, thank you all so much for your support. I know it's not been a great Pacer season so far, but hopefully this win over Philadelphia and a good game of consistent play will help them carry things over and start getting things back on track. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to dive into all things Thomas Bryant and the Indiana Pacers taking down the 76ers with Tyler Smith after this.
This is Tyrese Haliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
What's up, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast. And we are talking on a Friday night after the Indiana Pacers return to action and take down the Philadelphia 76ers 121 to 107. But before we jump into the game recap, I'm bringing on Tyler Smith from Indy Sports Legends to talk to me about the most recent news we heard today before the game started that the Indiana Pacers were going to be making a trade with the Miami Heat to acquire Indiana Hoosier legend Thomas Bryant. Tyler, tell me a little bit more about Thomas Bryant, his time in the league and where he's at now in his career and how he fits this Pacers team.
Well, it's always cool to see a former Hoosier become a Pacer. It's not happened very often. Obviously, Oladipo. Was trying to rack my brain on some others over the years, but hasn't happened very often. One thing that's pretty cool that I think Fachi would love is Thomas Bryant's middle name is Jermaine, so that's got to be good news
Okay.
for Pacers. So, other than that, though, this move was also got the Mark Monteith approval on Twitter tonight, so that's a good thing as well. But yeah, he's had a couple good years. It's been a bit of a rough go in Miami. Maybe he doesn't fit the quote unquote Heat culture that Haslam and some others have referenced over the years. Who knows? Maybe just their style of play. But he's had a couple good years in some different spots. Does some good things for you. Can remind you a little bit of how Jalen Smith played as a Pacer at times. So I think that's what the Pacers are probably hoping. They can unleash maybe even Jalen Smith light a little bit. Who knows? But yeah, he's at times he shot over 40% from three. He's had some seasons of like 12 and 7. This year is in a small sample, but his blocks are up. He's getting about a block a game, even though he's only playing 11 and a half minutes. So he does some good things, and maybe if nothing else, he's going to bring some energy. They had some good energy tonight, but it's been lacking at times throughout the year. So Hoosier fans know about the energy that Bryant can bring to a team.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. There was a lot of speculation in the media room around the time the Heat were in town for the Friday night game for the NBA Cup, and then that Sunday game where the Pacers ended up coming back and beating them in that one. Miles Turner had a big game there. So I think there was a lot of speculation though. Like Thomas Bryant makes a lot of sense, and the big thing here is his contract fits perfectly within the Pacers' salary cap space. I think Tony East had this out there on social media. Basically, just said that the Pacers still are like $160,000 or something like that below the tax, with this move happening the way that it does, so the Pacers don't actually have to send anything out. But I did see Ian Begley, a guy that reports on the New York Knicks and does a good job covering that team, say that this deal could include James Wiseman. So I don't know if it's official or not, like what exactly is being sent, but all that we know so far is it's a swap of second round picks for Thomas Bryant. And so you don't really have to give up anything to make this deal happen. And I think you brought up a great point. This is someone that can kind of replicate what Jalen Smith did last year. And I think the Pacers just need somebody at the 5 that can kind of do what Miles Turner does in terms of spacing the floor, allowing more room to operate. You like having kind of that Isaiah Jackson level player that can do a little bit of, things differently. But with who's out there on the market now and for the cost of what Thomas Bryant is compared to maybe some other players, this to me makes a ton of sense because if you can get even just a fraction of what Jalen gave you last year from your backup center, it really does help. And I think that it was necessary to not put too many miles on Obi Toppin at the backup 5 and Miles Turner. You don't want to you don't want to have a lot of minutes for him throughout the regular season because that to me is more worrisome than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they could only go so long with that. And, I think they still have the opportunity to play small at times and do some different things with the guys they have. But, obviously to get a guy with some experience in there who can bring some energy and as we said, play in those ways. Jalen Smith was kind of a 17 to 19 minute guy for the Pacers and 10 and 5, shot over 40 from 3, I believe, in his last year. So even if Thomas Bryant's not replicating those kind of numbers, if he be even close to that, I think some nights he'll probably get those minutes, but other nights maybe it's kind of matchup based and here and there. But he's had a good catch and shoot numbers, which will fit well with the rest of the squad as they look to continue to try and rebuild some of what they lost with last year's offense. So I think it's a good move, and it's not maybe going to move the needle in huge ways like some fans would like with a midseason acquisition, but losing 2 guys to the same injury, you got to do something, and I think it's about as good as they could have done considering the cap and all that other stuff.
Yeah, they had to get a healthy body. There was a ton of noise out there about them going to acquire one. I mean, even Rick Carlisle on Tuesday's practice, I believe it was, said it might have been Wednesday's practice, but he said, we're be on the lookout for December 15th. A lot of things can happen then. So when he's already kind of hinting at that, you've got Jake Fisher reporting that the Pacers are one of the most active teams looking for a backup center, and then Shams reporting that the deal is going to happen Sunday on a Friday afternoon. I think it is very interesting that all this stuff just got leaked so early, considering the trade can't happen. But you're right, the Pacers desperately needed a body to put out there, and Moses Brown clearly was not the answer. They didn't trust him. They didn't like his fit. They played Enrique Freeman over him, so getting a guy that they think can fit a little bit better was actually on an NBA roster, has been in the league for about 8 years, career 36% three-point shooter. I think that you're hoping that you can get something, and I will say this, it's better to do it now in early December before the trade deadline to see if he's actually going to fit, because they could try this out for the next month or so and just say, look, this isn't much of an upgrade over Moses Brown. This is not the right fit for us at the center spot, and it still gives them some time to maybe address it again before the trade deadline approaches here at the beginning of February. I don't know if you felt that way or not, but I just think that getting someone that's a little bit more competent that might fit the system better made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen, obviously, with the Pacers struggling this time of year, a lot of fans want to see another big splash, but it's almost like, can the team survive this tough stretch that's coming up to even make it worth, trying to, trade from within your core or whatever you're trying to do to try to make a splash if this year's even the time to do it. So making a move like this to help your depth without breaking the bank or, giving up assets is a good move. And I think the Pacers probably see something there. They've had some success in recent years, taking a team's kind of scrap heap and turning them into something. Neesmith and even to a degree Obi Toppin and some others. So it's like, why not go for it and see if they can again make him kind of like Jalen was and go from there. And as you mentioned, very interesting for in season to have a move, days in advance. You could see that in the offseason, but definitely different to have it in season like that.
Yeah, it just kind of shows you where the Pacers are at on the center market. It's the best kept secret, I guess you could say, in the NBA is Indiana desperately needs a backup five with the injuries to Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson. And I do think it is worth monitoring just to see what they do with this trade overall. Like, do they include Wiseman? Is that a good move, in your opinion, to give up on a young player already that's, got another year on his contract? It's one of those things where it's like Wiseman, I think the Pacers had high hopes for him, but Achilles injuries are hard to they're hard to come back from. They're very tough. So I just think that at this point you have to do what you got to do to get some help in here. But you talked about it, like people want to splash. I think the best splash that they can get is for the Pacers to start playing like the Pacers of old. And tonight, you saw that. The Pacers win 121 to 107, and Tyrese Haliburton, once again, looked like that all NBA level player with 32 points and not one, and not two, not three, but seven made three-pointers from Tyrese tonight. Really looking good from outside with an additional 11 assists. This is who we are hoping to see more of, and I think the last 4 days being off for the Pacers was probably the most helpful and beneficial to a guy like Tyrese, who has had a really up and down season.
Yeah, if they came out flat tonight after that layoff, it would just add to the confusion and some of the panic that is probably setting in from the fan base. But it's kind of ironic the team looks so terrible on the road and so good at home to start the year. But the last 3 games, of course, they have 2 nice road wins and somehow lose at home to Charlotte without half their roster. So the confusion of this team and this franchise in many ways, even from the last few years, is kind of rearing its ugly head. But good one tonight and a lot of energy. It was nice to just see not only Haliburton play well, but the energy from the bench. Really, in a course of over 48 minutes, you're going to have, some lapses in there, but for the most part, they were really playing together and really looked like they wanted this one, and they went out and got it.
No, they definitely did. I mean, they ended up having four more three-pointers made than Philadelphia, which isn't a ton. And if you look at the box score, it's kind of shocking that Philadelphia had 32 free throw attempts compared to just 17 for the Pacers. But Indiana won where it mattered the most. They won the points in the paint, they won the fast break points, and they out-rebounded. Well, they didn't actually out-rebound Philadelphia. I thought they did there for a second, but they were effective in this game on the glass, and were pretty close with that matchup. It wasn't like a blowout one side or the other, but I just felt like the defense from Indiana was pretty solid overall, but they were able to get out and run, and I think they made the 76ers, especially in the first half, really pay with their ability to run and kind of push Joel Embiid, who is a little bit of a slower player. And Mathurin went up for a offensive rebound, came down, and his wrist hit Embiid in the face, and Embiid grabbed his face. They had to call timeout at the end of the second quarter. He did not return to the game. And Miles Turner was on the bench with 3 fouls. Miles always struggles in this matchup to stay out of foul trouble. He ends up picking his fourth up early in the third quarter against Gershon Yabusele. Comes out of the game, and Obi Toppin had to come in and play the small ball five. And I think this was the perfect kind of matchup that Obi Toppin can kind of expose, because Obi Toppin was really good in the first half, but even better to me in the second half. He had 20 points on 7 of 11 shooting, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. He was everywhere tonight, and it kind of brought back old feelings from
Yeah.
last year's season when Miles got in foul trouble and the Pacers had to go small, and they took advantage of that. Despite Tyrese Maxey, having 50 in one game, but the next game the Pacers win that one, and it was thanks to Obi Toppin. I felt like this was a very reminiscent game of what happened last year.
Yeah, for sure. And he also had 3 steals and just made a bunch of big plays. And, the starting five were all had, huge plus minus numbers. The bench, not so much, except for Obi. So the +9 for Obi. And sometimes that's all it takes. You just need, 1 or 2 guys to come in, give energy, and when they're in, either stabilize or go on a run. And he did that and, hit all his free throws. And he's been playing a lot better lately, had a rough start to the year. And I think feels like probably 3 of the last 4 or so, he's been playing well. And obviously that's important for a team that is down with some injuries to have, some of their mainstays getting back to at least close to last year's levels.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go to Pascal Siakam now because he looked great in this game as well. Him and Tyrese really got things going on early in the first half, and it carried over into the second half. Siakam only had 11 shots, which I think a lot of fans would like to see more of, but still 9 of 11 from the field for 23 points. 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 of 2 from the 3-point line. Also had a steal and a block, was a plus 19 in this game. You could really feel his impact. And I think that for a guy like Siakam and a guy like Haliburton, they're the ones that probably needed this reset of the regular season more than anybody, because Siakam's been playing a lot of minutes, and there's been a lot of pressure on him. I guess you could say the weight's been pretty heavy for him to carry this team as Halliburton's kind of going through the motions. But it's good to see these two have a good game together. Just the previous game against Charlotte on Sunday, they combined for 18 points. In this game, they combined for 55. So pretty much triple what they did against the Hornets. And to me, that was incredibly necessary because even though Philadelphia's record is not great, they're 7-16. They're not a great team right now. There's not a lot of chemistry there. This is a game, like you said earlier. If the Pacers come out flat and don't look like the team we hoped that they would come out and play like, it would have been an awful sign, and I think people would have been really upset. So I think that Siakam and Halliburton kind of taking on that leadership role in terms of, doing it on the court. That was massive because Turner only 7 points, Nembhard only 5, Mathurin only 13. They really carried the scoring load for that starting 5.
Yeah, it's really important, and especially when you consider the Pacers started the year 2-11 on the road. It's like I don't care who you're playing, and we saw it obviously against Charlotte at home. A win's a win, and especially for this team this year, a road win is huge. So to get a couple of those, as you mentioned, Philly's had a rough start, but they had most of their horses for at least most of the game. So yeah, it's big. I also think it's important for Siakam to have some nights like this where he played 31 minutes. He's not asked to play 38, 40. That's going to be important to keep some miles off his feet throughout the year when you can kind of pick and choose those nights when whether it's a blowout or not, to if other guys are rolling, to kind of get him in that more mid-range of minutes. And because we saw last year late how much they're going to need those guys, how many minutes they're going to play. I also thought Nembhard had kind of a Nembhard special where it's one of those nights where not a huge scoring night with 5, but he made big plays at right times, 7 assists, 4 boards, just seemed to be in the right spot in key moments and led the team at plus 24. That was sorely missing for obviously several weeks, just to get a guy that can kind of be the Swiss Army knife and do a bunch of different things.
You know what else Andrew Nembhard does? He guards Tyrese Maxey,
Yeah.
and at times he's guarding Paul George. So, you don't love seeing a 6'4" guard on a 6'9" wing, but when they're one of your better options defensively, you do that. And I want to give him a lot of credit for that because I felt like his defense was important. And I will say the same thing about Mathurin. Mathurin's stats, they're pretty bleak, right? 13.7 rebounds, 4 assists. Like nothing really pops off on that. But once again, I thought he looked better defensively. Not probably as good as Nembhard did the whole entirety of the game, but I do think there were some really nice moments where he was guarding Paul George. Paul George is one of those guys that has had his way with the Pacers since they traded him. But 5 of 12 from the field in 35 minutes, just 15 points. I mean, you live with that 10 out of 10 times. Like that is just a great stat line defensively if you're a team guarding Paul George. And Tyrese Maxey only had 22 points on 7 of 15 shooting. So I think you got to give both those guys credit for drawing those assignments for the majority of the game and the way they were able to impact them defensively and kind of take them out of their rhythm. And I think the Pacers' style just kind of wore them down at times too. I think Indiana hitting a lot of their threes, especially early on. I don't know if they continued on with that. I feel like in the third quarter, Haliburton went on a little heat check there, started chucking some threes that maybe weren't the best looks. But other than that, I felt like most of the three-pointers the Pacers were shooting were pretty good looks. Obviously you hope Mathurin, Turner, and Nembhard don't shoot 1 of 10 from 3 the next time they play at starting 5. But it was one of those things where it was like Haliburton had so many clutch threes and so did Toppin and Siakam. It was like, okay, this feels pretty good. And I will say this, Johnny Furphy, the 3 that he hit to end the third quarter to kind of give the Pacers a 7-point lead cushion there, it was massive because it was getting loud in there. And for a rookie to hit a corner 3 in that moment, he was wide open, yes, but just that's a lot of pressure. I thought that was just an excellent shot from him, and it kind of was, in a way, a game changer to keep Indiana from, crumbling like they've done previously this season.
Yeah, it's so important in the NBA, especially because teams are going to make runs. you feel like a 10 to 15 point lead is, like what 4 points used to feel like.
Yeah.
And so when a run's happening, when the building's getting loud, to have those big shots to kind of, calm it down. So that was huge for the rookie to do that. I also thought a jumper by who else? TJ McConnell in a big moment kind of calmed some things down. So, that's important. That experience is good. And, what I love probably the most in this game was the 35 assists to 10 turnovers.
Yeah.
That is absolutely getting back to what we've grown accustomed to with this group from last season.
Yeah, the ball was moving well tonight, and it was everybody. I think um, a couple of those assists that Matherin had were to Haliburton. Maybe they all four were to Haliburton. I can't remember, but I saw somebody tweet it out. But it was just like he was doing a good job of not holding onto the ball like he usually does. And there was a couple of times where he had some nice catch and shoot opportunities, and he took advantage of those and took those shots. So it's all just a work in progress. It's still early in the season, and I think it's easy to push the panic button just because it's so frustrating in the moment. But when this team plays like this, you feel a lot better about it. And I think that hopefully this game kind of helps them refocus, recharge. They'll have the Pelicans on Sunday. It'll be interesting to see how they respond in that game after a big road victory, because a lot of people thought last week, after a big road victory to end the road trip against Chicago, oh, that's going to carry over into the game against the Hornets, and they had their worst game of the season. So it's like, how do they build off this? They keep talking about consistency. They keep preaching it. And I would say probably for the first time this season, we saw 48 minutes or mostly 48 minutes of consistent basketball from start to finish from this group. And can they carry that over into the next game? Because if they can do that, yeah, they have a rough road trip coming up here starting, I think it's on Thursday. Then they have some really tough home games when they return from that road trip. But as tough as that schedule is, if they can start playing basketball the right way, they're gonna win some of those games that they're probably not predicted to win on paper. So I just think they have to build off of this momentum that they've established in this game, and they can't let it be just like a flash in the pan like it was against Chicago.
Yeah, they got to go prove it. And they got to, because of this hole they've dug, they're going to have to at some point have a hot stretch that we know they're fully capable of. Right now, they're kind of just in a bit of survival mode because, as I mentioned, I even gave them a few wins in the tough stretch coming up because, they're not going to get shut out. But I was like, maybe this is even generous, but I felt like they might be kind of in the 14-22 or 15-21 kind of range after that stretch of games, which isn't great. But again, if they can survive a little bit, start getting some guys back, then you can, it's still less than half the season would be over at that point. And I was also looking, they're going to have, after that stretch, they will have 13. They played 13 at home and 20 on the road after the first 33 games. So they'll get a bunch of home games when they need it the most. So that'll help as well. But as far as tonight's game, you mentioned the 48 minutes. They won 3 of the 4 quarters. Haven't done that much this year, even in wins. So something to build off of. But as you said, can they go out and prove it Sunday before the tough stretch happens?
Yeah, I think this is the first double-digit victory for the Pacers this season as well. So
Well,
might be wrong, but I believe that's correct, or at least the first non-clutch game I think they've won. Maybe that was the Bulls game, but I'm trying to go back and remember if they had a double-digit win. They might have beat the Knicks by double digits. I can't remember. They beat the Knicks by 11, so that was a double-digit win. But still, they haven't had very many of those. A lot of these games have been very close. They've been considered clutch games, things like that. So, good to see the Pacers play better basketball. I think everybody enjoyed the break. I think the fans needed the break from seeing multiple games of just blah basketball. Like, yuck. It was just awful. It was gross. But other than that, we do give out our player awards here at the end of the game. And so since you're our guest, I would love for you to give out these awards. So I'll let you know what they are. We have our Mel Daniels MVP of the game. Who do you think is most deserving of those honors?
Well, got to go Halliburton there with 32 and 11. And you could say that he really set the pace in the game. So he was really strong. It's good to see that his road woes here lately have kind of disappeared, as we all knew it would, even though some people on the old X.com were saying that he's just washed now at 24 years old. But we knew that would happen at some point. It's good to see it So 32-11 for Tyrese.
Yeah, I think this team it goes as Halliburton goes, and I think that's pretty obvious. It's not like oh, here's a great basketball analysis comment for you. It's just when he plays really good, this team is usually pretty good or has a very good chance of winning. So the more games he plays like this, the better the Pacers will be moving forward. Now, our next player is the Reggie Miller clutch player of the game. So you were watching that fourth quarter. I mean, it never really felt like the Sixers were going to get close, but was there somebody that stood out to you in the fourth quarter that maybe kind of put this game over the top for Indiana?
This one's close between, I would say, Obi and Siakam, but I'll go ahead and go Obi, just because, as I'm coming back from coaching game tonight, I'm watching some here and there in the first half, and then was able to see most of the second half. It seemed like, when I was watching, especially, Obi was the one to get the big dunk, the big three, made all his free throws. So you could go one of probably three different ways here, but I'll go with Obi on this one.
Yeah, I mean, this was just a great game from Obi. Like, if you could almost make the case that he could be the player of the game for this one. Like, obviously Halliburton deserves it. I think I would give it to Halliburton just because it was a phenomenal performance. But like Obi Toppin was phenomenal in his own role, and I think that that is a great way to honor him in this game. And our last one here is our feisty Foster hustle player of the game. Now, I'm sure there's a handful of guys you could go here with this one, but is there one that sticks out to you?
Will, do you guys ever do repeats? Because I might say Obi, but if you don't do a repeat,
You could
maybe I
do
go with
repeats if you want.
okay. Maybe a tie from what I saw, maybe Obi Toppin and then McConnell with, it wasn't like this full vintage game for McConnell, but there were some key moments. But I'd probably still lean Obi for feisty Foster in this one.
All right, Obi Toppin just running away with the awards today. So that is totally fair. We have definitely doubled down on some of those, and a lot of times when Halliburton's played well, he will also win the clutch player of the game. So sometimes we do try to change it up just to be different. I think if I were to give it to somebody that's maybe not standing out in a box score, I can maybe make the case for an Andrew Nemhard for just the way that he competed on defense both ends and really kind of muck things up there for Philadelphia if you want to go that, but we're not doing defensive players. So hustle player Obi Toppin did get 8 rebounds, which would match Siakam as the team high. So some really good stuff from this. I would say in terms of negative things that I saw from this game, the one turnover that Jarris Walker had was probably the worst turnover I've seen from him in a while. Threw a lazy behind the back pass that got stolen, and thankfully Philadelphia didn't score on it, but it was just like those kind of plays are what have kept him out of the rotation. I would say Turner, once again, did not have a very good game. And, just I feel like when he gets in foul trouble, he gets in his head mentally. I'm sure you can, attest to this. It's just like he can never get past it usually, which was so awesome to see last year in Philly because that was not the norm for him because he actually did come into the fourth quarter after being in foul trouble for the first 3 and really impacted the game. But this game tonight, I felt like, yes, he was a positive in the plus minus, but I do not believe that he played a great game. So I think I would like to see how he bounces back against New Orleans. But other than that, I felt like everybody, for the most part, had a pretty positive tonight. I mean, Matherin, like we talked about, the box score wasn't great. And if you want to nitpick, yeah, you could say he missed some little close shots around the rim, and it was some frustrating misses. But I think overall, Matherin had a good game, not a great game, not a stellar game, but he was better than average. So, other than that, did you have any other negatives you want to point out in this game?
I didn't see much. I mean, especially we've had some games this year where you could have a long a long list of those things, but yeah, I was watching when I saw the Walker pass, and so I'm right there with you. And I also agree with Ben Mathurin. If he has a night where he's 5 of 14, but he can contribute 7 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, and just impact in other ways. And he's mentioned that to us and to in many interviews, just being able to impact winning. So yeah, I would say that pass was pretty much it from what I saw.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's worked on that 3-point shot. It was nice. There was one play, I forget if it was the third or the fourth quarter. He was wanting the Pacers to like challenge a call, but he was clearly out of position. And he reached in and hit the ball, but he completely took the guy's body out before that. And so I think, we had Caitlin Cooper on this podcast this week, and one thing she said about Jarris is defensively, he uses his hands too much. He tries to rely on his hands to be his best part of his defense, which was point blank right there, just not guarding properly and trying to use his lengthy, wingspan to create a steal, which is fine from time to time, but it's kind of like when you are playing in pickup basketball, right? And there's that slower guy that can't guard anybody, so he'll let you go by and then he'll try to swipe his arm around and hit the ball up from behind you as you're driving. It's like not exactly that, but it just kind of reminds me of that. It's just like lazy defense that you might get the benefit of every once in a while. So just, Jarris, I know people like to talk about Jarris, whether it's good or bad. They want to see him do well. I think tonight was not the greatest game for him, but good opportunity for him to grow. And I think that once you get more guys back healthy, you can kind of limit his minutes in his role. And I think that will simplify things for him as this team starts to get healthy. But Tyler, we had to watch the IU game before we came on here, and that was one of the roughest ends to a game. So I'm glad we got to talk about this one. But would you like to promote anything here tonight for what you're doing on Indy Sports Legends?
That's the main spot, IndySportsLegends.com. I've got a variety of different spots, journal review, and some work for the Hoosier.com and some other places. But Tyler Smith _ISL on Twitter or X, whatever you call it. And yeah, we'll keep going. Almost had the trifecta tonight with a good Cubs trade and the Pacer win, but IU could not complete the trifecta. But it's all right.
I did not see the Cubs trade. What was the Cubs trade?
They got Kyle Tucker. They finally have a superstar on their team.
Nice. That's a big trade right there for the Cubs. I know the Cubs have been kind of going through it a little bit since their World Series victory. And so, I heard Nolan Arenado from the Cardinals is available if you like him. So
I'll pass on that one.
yeah, I was laughing that they've been openly trying to trade him. So that's just like, okay, let's just lose all leverage. But anyway, Tyler, thanks again for coming on. Pacer Nation, we thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast. Facci will be back Sunday to recap the Pacers-Pelicans game, so you don't want to miss that. And so, as Facci would say, if you're glad the Pacers finally got a victory against, anybody, really, then hit me with those 3 words, Tyler.
Let's go Pacers.